Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to start out with Mel Patton, who died recently at the age of 89. Mel Patton was one of the great American sprinters of the second half of the 20th century, and at one point after World War II, he was known as the fastest man in the world. Today, in high-level track, they run the 100 meters. Back in the late 1940s and 1950s and up through the 1960s, outside of high-level competition, in the United States, they ran the 100-yard dash. That's the same race we used to run in high school. And Mel Patton broke the world record for the 100-yard dash at 9.3 seconds. The world record, by the way, was held by Jesse Owens, and Patton's record stood for over 10 years. Came out of L.A., broke his leg when he was a little boy in a traffic accident, served in the Navy, and went to USC after the war. And he was America's and indeed the world's top sprinter in the late 1940s. His picture was on the cover of Life and Time, and he was expected to win the 100 meters at the London Olympics in 1948. But he was beaten in the time trials here in Evanston, Illinois, about 4 miles from where I'm talking right now, and he performed poorly in the 100 meters in the Olympics. He finished 5th out of the medal. He did, however, win 2 gold medals at the London Olympics, the 200 meters, which he won by inches, and he was the anchorman on the American 4x100 meter relay team. Here is a little bit of the finish of that race.
400 meters men's relay. And they're away to a great start. Once again, the Americans made the running, streaking round the track towards the disputed changeover. A lightning change, Ewell to Wright. And now it's Wright who keeps the U.S. team well in the lead, with Great Britain challenging. The next change, and now it's Wright to Dillard, who again carries the American colors to the front with Britain still in pursuit. The last vital stage. And for America, it's Dillard to yet another ace sprinter, Mel Patton. Hot on his heels comes Jack Archer of Great Britain, putting on a final spurt. But nothing can catch Patton now. Up to the finishing line, a win for the USA, with Britain in a very good second place. At first, the victorious American team were disqualified for an alleged faulty changeover. But this decision was later reversed. The final result: the USA first, Great Britain second, Italy third.
Next year, Mel Patton broke Jesse Owens' record for the 220 yards, but he remained an amateur. Mel Patton is one of those guys who today would be a multimillionaire from what he did in track and field, but it was a different time then, and he never really made any money from all his great exploits. We're going to move on now to Farley Mowat, who died recently at the age of 92, and Farley Mowat was one of Canada's top writers. He was an environmentalist, he was a socialist, he didn't like the United States very much, he was a little bit of a weird dude on top of all that. He did his research in isolation, living for long periods of time in the Canadian wilds, and his experiences in the Canadian tundra were made into the 1983 Disney movie Never Cry Wolf, starring Charles Martin Smith and Brian Dennehy. It's actually a pretty enjoyable movie. Charles Martin Smith is very good, and Brian Dennehy is the evil American. Major problem I had with the movies, I still saw Charles Martin Smith as Toad from American Graffiti, and I couldn't get that out of my mind. Anyway, here's Canadian TV on Farley Mowat.
Farley Mowat once said, "Without a function we cease to be, so I will write until I die." And so he did, last night, at the age of 92, still writing. Mowat's first book was debated in the House of Commons. The writings that followed indelibly etched into the minds of millions. His literary legacy, undeniable. He wrote about 40 books over the course of nearly 60 years. They've sold 17 million copies and have been translated into 52 languages. He's read and renowned the world over as a great storyteller, a humorist, and an environmentalist. Even those who've never read one of his yarns feel his cultural impact because, in a way, many Canadians are seeing their country through Mowat's eyes. Deanna Sumanak has that story.
Farley Mowat loved Canada, wrote about it, and changed it. Farley Mowat's books had power because he wrote about what he saw around him. Born in Ontario, he grew up in Saskatchewan, surrounded by the grandeur of the prairies and always the company of animals. Early family pets were the inspiration behind his children's books, popular to this day: The Dog Who Wouldn't Be and Owls in the Family. Mowat fought for the underdog, both human and animal. His account of the plight of a remote Inuit band, People of the Deer, sparked a national debate about Canada's policies in the Arctic.
I encountered them, heard a little bit about their story, got to know them slightly. was appalled at what was happening to them. And what was happening to them was that they were being extirpated. They were dying off.
And he wrote about it and brought it alive. And so Canadians who've never been to the Arctic, for example, feel that the Arctic belongs to them.
He says he spent a year living with a pack of Arctic wolves. The result, Never Cry Wolf, is credited with changing the image of the animal as a vicious predator, even with stopping wolf calls as far away as Russia. He also took aim at the seal hunt. But if moral outrage was Mowat's fuel, some felt he relied on it a little too much. Many of his books were criticized over their factual accuracy.
Farley had a great line that I don't think he invented, but I use it all the time myself, which is never let the facts get in the way of the truth. And some of that was theater, but he was determined to express the stories as he saw them.
As he saw them, no matter what the consequence.
The powers that be say, well, you can't preach and be a writer. I say...
Mowat continued writing about things that moved and outraged him for the rest of his life, proving to the world that Canadians are nice enough when they're nice, but when they're feisty, they're fascinating.
Yeah, Farley Mowat was feisty, all right. Here's an interview with him where he tells a little bit about his early upbringing.
I went to Newfoundland originally without any clear idea of where I was going or what I was going to do when I got there. That's normal for me. But it was back in 1953, and I was sailing down the St. Lawrence River with my father in his old ketch, the Scotch bonnet. And we stopped at Rimouski on the way. We put in there with some damage to the vessel and moored alongside a salvage tug. And the salvage tug's crew were all Newfoundlanders. And they took us aboard their big vessel, fed us a lot of rum and fish and brews, which is Newfoundland's special food that only the strongs can survive. And told us a lot of stories about Newfoundland. And both my father and I were enthralled. The year that followed, I thought to myself, I should go down there and see that place. And I did, and fell in love with it. Because the people in Newfoundland epitomized all of the really extraordinary qualities that make the human species viable or worthwhile, endurable, make the human species endurable. They were people of adversity who understood that you only survive in this world if you do so by making an accommodation with the natural world around you. And that was the only way they could survive, and they did it. And that is the way that I believe that mankind must behave if he's going to stay alive on this planet. So I fell in love with the place. I fell in love with the people. And the country itself, of course, you don't need to describe that. It's so gorgeous. It's such an extraordinary melange of types and things, but always with the sea. Always with the sea in the background, roaring or whispering in your ear, depends on which. It's a part of the world that combines the best of wilderness and the least obnoxious of civilization.
Yeah, you get a real feel for what a feisty Canadian Farley Mowat was there. And like I say, he was a little bit of a weird dude. Here's a little bit more of the interview with him.
Every time I go out to do a book signing, I hate that sort of operation, but every time I go, it's made tolerable for me by somebody, some individual, who says to me, 50 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 3 days ago, I read one of your books, and I was moved by it. It made me think, or it made me happy. It changed some infinitesimal way my way of life. Well, if enough people tell me that, after a while I begin to feel good again and realize that, I haven't wasted my time. And I haven't. Tried to fulfill the function that is in me, which is that of the storyteller, the saga man, the writer. The storyteller. Underline the word storyteller. And in telling stories, I'm doing what human beings, human animals have been doing since time immemorial, and will do probably until we disappear. And that's a good function.
We're going to close tonight with Jet Magazine, which was born here in Chicago in 1951, and it's going the way of the Ladies' Home Journal and the Oxford English Dictionary, which we've done in the last couple of weeks. The magazine will cease to print and become an online only in 2014. Jet Magazine covered all things black, from the civil rights struggle to athletes to politicians, and the great comedian Red Foxx called it the Negro Bible. Without questions, Jet's finest hour was its 1955 and 1956 coverage of the murder in Mississippi of 14-year-old Emmett Till from Chicago, which we've talked about before, and the subsequent trial of his killers. Jet did unquestionably the best coverage of the whole incident, and scholars should refer to Jet whenever they're doing any work on it. And it also published the first photographs of Emmett Till's open casket, which his mother insisted upon. Due to their graphic nature, we're not going to show them on the podcast, but you can find them fairly easily if you want to look them up. Here's WGN-TV News Chicago discussing the Johnson publication, Jet Magazine.
6 decades of it, Jet Magazine, a popular read for a lot of people, especially in the African-American community. However, there's a major change. It'll now only be available soon digitally, as the printed version will go away. WGN's Frank Holland is at the Homer Johnson Publishing Company building, South Michigan Avenue, where it all began. Frank.
Yeah, good evening, Mark. Johnson Publishing has undergone some big changes in recent years. First, as you said, they've moved from their historic office building here on South Michigan Avenue, and now they're taking their iconic magazine, Jet, from print to digital only. It's a magazine small in size, but big in impact in the black community. After more than 60 years in print, Jet will go all digital starting next month.
It is a rejuvenation and a rebirth, in a sense, of our beloved Jet magazine.
Desiree Rogers, CEO of Johnson Publishing, the parent company of Jet, says the change is about bringing in a younger audience. The weekly magazine has covered everything from civil rights champions to heavyweight champions during its historic run. Rogers says the decision to go all digital is about attracting the next generation of readers.
We want to kind of continue to have the current audience that we have. I promise you this app's going to be easy, and we want to have some new people take a look at the magazine. We've got a very young, diverse group of folks that are actually writing the publications now.
Longtime reader Renee Fisher feels the change will help keep Jet relevant.
It's the beginning of something bigger and different to keep going with how media is actually progressing. I think it's like a progression.
Jet magazine debuted in November of 1951 as the Negro Digest. In the years since, it has become a staple in barbershops and beauty salons around the country.
You don't have a Jet in your collection. You don't have a complete magazine collection in your barbershop. So it's always very important just to have a Jet. And when you read it, it just really keeps you informed.
One of the most popular features is the Jet Beauty of the Week. Maida Smith, who appeared as a beauty in 2002, feels something special will be lost in the transition.
It was sexy, but it was classy, and, it was a pinup, so it's part of a dying age that I wish wasn't dying.
Back out here live, the Jet Magazine digital app will cost $20 a year, the same as a subscription to the magazine costs now. The final print issue, will be on newsstands on June 23rd, and we're told the Obamas will grace the final cover. Here in the South Loop, Frank Holland, WGN News.
Gene Denby wrote for NPR about Jet. Jet spent its formative years necessarily concerned with the cataclysms happening in black American life, and was buoyed by support from consumers who wanted to support black publications, entertainers, and the movement. But that was decades ago. In an age in which celebrities tweet candidly, sites of all kinds tackle black lives with more depth and more often, Jet recently moved from weekly to once every 3 weeks, and there wasn't a lot of space left for generalist publication without exclusive content or a distinct point of view. The Jet managed to hang on in print as long as it did is something of a minor miracle. Just last summer, Jet announced it was undergoing a redesign of its print edition, presumably in an attempt to revitalize flagging appeal. Code Switch wanted to do a write-up on it, so we ventured out to grab a copy. But after trips to supermarkets, drugstores, and the magazine shop at Union Station in Washington, D.C., we came up empty. None of the outlets near us, in the half-black city that NPR calls home, was carrying it. Jet had long been both everywhere and overlooked, and it seems it's going out in the same way. Well, let's hope he's wrong and it catches on online, because I think we still need Jet. I want to thank my producer, Sid Tepps, and I was a little hard coming up with a final song tonight because our features were Canadian and Jet. Not an easy combination. So I decided to take my favorite Canadian folk singer, who's watching a jet plane fly overhead that he can't get on. This is Gordon Lightfoot with Early Morning Rain.
In the early morning rain, with $1 in my hand, out on the runway number 9, big 707 set to go. You can jump a jet plane like you can a freight train, so I best be on my way in the early morning rain.